It's September the 13th, 2014. I'm Mike Benedetti. This is 508, a show about Worcester. Today we're in Worcester's beautiful Winslow Park, where they're setting up for like a block party street fair today.
This isn't your birthday.
It's not my birthday. It's just a festival for the joy of festivals. Also today on the show, Noah Bombard of Mass Live.
Howdy.
And Brendan Melican.
Hey.
Of himself, affiliated with himself. West Hatnick. How's it going, Brendan?
Good, man. How are you?
Good. We haven't had a show in a little over a month. There's been so much stuff happening. Today, we're going to talk about 3 topics. All these topics are so giant that we're certainly not going to exhaust them, maybe only scratch the surface today. These topics are local journalism, the hunt for a new Worcester City manager, and primary elections. What do you guys want to talk about first?
I know nothing about the Telegram, so I have nothing to say about that.
Noah, of course, former Worcester Magazine editor, former Telegram and Gazette digital editor.
Yeah, something like that.
And now Mass Live digital editor.
Managing editor.
Managing editor.
Or managing producer.
Well, let's talk about let's talk about the primary elections, and then maybe talk about city manager a little bit. I feel like primary elections we can kind of fade into journalism from the primary elections. We had state elections this week. We don't talk a lot about state elections on this show. I just want to read off. I want to read off who the candidates are going to be, because honestly, guys, this is one complaint about local elections. I couldn't find any local news website that had a list of who will your candidates be this fall. Nobody just had that list. The telegram.com, good job, you have all that information. It just took me like 20 minutes on my phone to compile it. Here's what we got. First of all, you can still register to vote, right? For this fall election.
So, yeah.
Yeah?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. So I think you got until some point in October maybe to register to vote. So register to vote if you want to vote. This is not an election cycle where I'm going to advocate not voting as a protest.
Especially if you didn't fill out your city census. That's still the big one that gets you kicked off the rolls. And if you weren't a primary voter and didn't go through the process of having to put in a provisional ballot because you didn't fill out the last census or vote in one of the more recent elections, you're going to have a bad time in November when it comes to trying to vote.
So if it's been more than a couple of years, since you successfully voted,
I don't think it's a couple of years now. Just definitely hop on the city website and take a look. If you intend to vote in November, as early as possible, hop on the city's website, make sure that your voter registration is active, and if not, hop down to the clerk's office and take care of that. Because it's a really terrible experience on election day to have to go through the provisional ballot process.
So here's what we got in the ballot on the state level. We obviously have things like the governor and whatever, and Jim McGovern, our national representative, is running unopposed. We have a lot of people running unopposed, actually. For the first Worcester State Senate district, longtime State Senator Harriet Chandler will face Paul Franco. This is actually interesting. Paul Franco, Republican. I think it's fair to say Tea Party affiliated. What did he run for? State rep a couple times years ago?
Yes, and he's been involved in local races in the past, and he's a Worcester resident. Yeah. I mean, I don't know that the labeling is the right way to go. I think a lot of folks, especially on the Republican side, have kind of tried to distance themselves with affiliations and labels as they haven't necessarily gone their way over the last few years. But
Yeah, you don't really see a lot of people affiliating themselves with the Tea Party.
The personalities are still around, but the label seems to have gone by the wayside a little bit.
So that's the first state Senate district. In our second state Senate district, State Senator Michael Moore is running unopposed. Not the TV and movie Michael Moore, but another guy named Michael Moore. In the 12th district, which doesn't include the city of Worcester, I got to mention though that Brad Wyatt, friend of the show, is running as a Republican for state rep
Against Hank Naughton.
versus Hank Naughton, longtime incumbent state rep. So I don't know Hank Naughton, but I know Brad Wyatt, and I would endorse Brad Wyatt just because he's a nice guy. And finally, his downtown building is getting used for something constructive, student housing. Good job, Brad.
He's mentioned in a big lawsuit as well, too.
He's mentioned a big lawsuit this week, so hopefully it will not continue to be a traumatic and crazy couple of months for him before the election. But there you go, Brad Wyatt, friend of this show. The 13th district, state rep for Worcester, Spammin' John Mahoney is running unopposed. The incumbent John Mahoney. Jim O'Day.
He is a challenger. You got to double check your list.
Are you sure?
Yes.
Who's his challenger?
Cortez, I believe, is the woman's name. It's a
yes.
female that is Republican.
Yep.
I might be misspelling that, so I apologize. It's not intended to be an offense if I am, but or mispronouncing that.
I didn't actually have unopposed written on my sheet. I just had a blank, so maybe this is my own sloppiness.
Yeah.
Maybe John. Well, John. As it turns out, you actually are running against somebody.
Sorry about
Don't
that.
listen to me. Don't listen to me. This is
Continue the spamming.
This is why we have more than one person on this show. How about this? Jim O'Day, is he running unopposed in the 14th?
I believe so.
I believe he is. I have it written down in my paper.
And
that he
rightfully
is.
so. No, that snappy addresser should ever have an opponent.
Who could oppose Jim O'Day? Really?
Nobody.
In the 15th, we had a big Democratic primary. No Republican running in the 15th. But big Democratic primary where Mary Keefe, the incumbent, defeated Phil Palmieri and Perez in that primary. Palmieri, of course, Councilor Palpatine, longtime Worcester City Councilor, did not do super great in this
I
election.
think we would call that a crushing defeat.
A crushing defeat. It's so interesting for me to see how people run successful city council campaigns and then don't do very well for state rep.
Mike Germain is.
Mike Germain is another one in this. And then vice versa. Like Mary Keefe, before she ran successfully for state rep, had run unsuccessfully for city council. Spammin John Mahoney, before he ran successfully for state rep, had run unsuccessfully for city council. I don't know if there's a real pattern here. It's just interesting to see that like past results don't always
One of the things that I
predict.
think is worth pointing out is, you know, and you can go back to Harriet Chandler's race in the primary as well with Steve Marr. I think we still have this mentality of focusing on like things like lawn signs and presents and whatnot as somehow an indicator of an outcome in an election. And if you drove through like the Tatnick area, you would think that half of Harriet Chandler's base had eroded and gone to the other side just
Right.
based on lawn signs. Another crushing defeat. And I think it's one of those things for people to keep in mind that politicking has evolved to the point where you know it is all about data and identification of voters, and you can't rely upon a general tone or sense of how things are going to fall based on presence, how much you see somebody, even the support that you might see in front lawns. That doesn't actually translate to voter turnout.
Kevin Kassin is nodding his head yes as he
No,
hears you say this.
but Kevin Kassin is actually a great example of this. You know, he taps into what I think would be regarded as voting demographics and bases that most people aren't on most people's radars, and he does that very, very successfully. And if anything, it's just a sign of the city evolving and changing when it comes to the electorate, which is a great thing. I think it's what we've all been waiting for. But there's a lot of people playing catch up and don't even know how to tap into some of the demographics that are just waiting for the opportunity to support somebody who actually represents them in their interests. Congratulations, Kevin.
If you want to see a disgusted look on Kevin Kassin's face, just mention the words yard sign or election standout.
Yeah,
And he'll be like,
'cause
those
it's
are
not in
totally worthless. Totally worthless.
Absolutely, and it's stuff that you still have to do to appease the folks that have been doing the same thing over and over again, and you'll never break them from those habits as long as you're able to get them to understand that there is a whole other side to contemporary politicking that you can't ignore.
It's part of the sideshow, I think, to elections. You have that very public display, but a lot of these are about geography. I mean, you mentioned Harriet Chandler, you mentioned Hank Naughton. I mean, these are candidates who are really popular in very particular geographic areas. I mean, Hank Naughton a couple times has tried to, or at least looked into running for bigger office. Of course, he dipped his toes in the water for AG's race. Was it last year or the year before?
This year.
Yeah, this year. You know, and that petered out very quickly. But he's got a huge base. You know, right in Clinton and a few of the other neighboring towns that are just huge supporters of him.
And things change too. I mean, you know, you look at again, Harriet Chandler's the first Worcester Senate District. Towns, adjacent communities like Northborough, the demographics have changed dramatically just in the last decade in terms of median income, the residents, and you know their registration in terms of political party, their affiliations. Areas that used to be able to take for granted now require a lot of heavy lifting just to stay solid and hold on to what you have. Within the constraints of Worcester, it's no different. You know, there are a lot of new voters coming onto the program, and I think it's shaking up people's otherwise small, comfortable worlds very quickly.
You'll have two more local races to vote on in the fall, two more local/statewide races. One is 16th Worcester. If you live in 16th Worcester, Dan, how do you say his last name? Donahue? Donahue. Dan Donahue defeated Josh Perro in the primary, and there's no
contest on the other
challenger. Why are there no Republicans? Come on, people.
That was an interesting one, though. I mean, you know, you can look at it as not necessarily being the widest margins in terms of defeat, but Dan will forever be known as the guy who held off what will essentially be a $200,000 challenge. I mean,
so much money on the Josh Perro side of that
incredible.
campaign.
I mean, I don't think that's ever been seen in a state rep race in Worcester, and probably never seen again. But you know, that's to Dan and his people's credit. That I mean, holding off that kind of challenge is not an easy feat at all.
Yes. And finally, in the 17th Worcester, Doug Belanger defeated former city councilor Mike Germain and also Moses Dixon for the primary, Democratic primary there. This is the late John Benenda's old seat. And Kate Campanale. Mm-hmm. Do you say that last vowel in her name?
I'm going to let you.
I'm going to say Kate Campanale is running against. Will be running as a Republican against Doug Belanger in November. It was interesting to try to follow this election online. I really just like 30 minutes after the polls close, I want to go online and see how the results are rolling in. And Twitter was a good way to find out how the results are rolling in. In Worcester, if you have cable, which I don't, Channel 12, runs a little green screen list of the results. Their online stream of that is so low res that you can't read that. Mm-hmm. Worcester City Council fixed this. Twitter was a good way to sort of get some of that information. Occasionally people who are at City Hall were taking photos of the giant projection of that. Their photos of the projection of Channel 12, very readable, that they were putting on Facebook. There were a number of local websites who had I guess, this AP feed of confirmed election results. And so if you click the election results button on their website, on Mass Live was this way, the Telegram is this way, you would basically get this thing that had just a ton of zeros because it was extremely slow in updating compared to the actual updates coming out of city clerks' offices or whatever. I don't know. I was driven crazy by spending an hour trying to find this out. I should have just waited 2 hours after the election and everyone would have told me everything.
Right.
But that in the middle time where somebody who's passionate about the election but not enough to go down to City Hall, I was being driven crazy.
Mm-hmm. It isn't. I mean, we got to move on to other topics, but it is an interesting thing that I hope town clerks across the state are looking at. That it's not just people at home, voters that are interested in that data. It's campaigns themselves, and it's a challenge and a very expensive process to actually have people on the ground pulling numbers directly from either polling places or clerks' offices as they come through. And it's funny when you look at. I think Boston.com had probably, no offense to Mass Live, I think had one of the better feeds in terms, at least for the governor's race, in terms of numbers coming in live.
I think they had the same feed that we had.
Did they have the same feed?
Yeah.
So I was looking at them just for updates, and it was really amazing to see how many towns had reported before Worcester did. And that's not a knock against Worcester. It's a big community. There's a lot of polling places and a lot of data to pool before you can report anything. But I with three nerds sitting at the table, I would imagine that we could agree that there's just a better way to do things, and it's one of those places where technology needs to be leaned on a little bit more to get those results out.
We meaning the 508 type people here, we're gonna do something for this November election. We're gonna have somebody at City Hall and maybe.
Can we get my fiber network up first?
We're not. No, this is more important. We're gonna do something involving Google Docs or Twitter or something.
It's a good point, and I think the issue, of course, is that most of the media now we're relying on AP. Because, as you said, to put somebody out at the polls is pretty expensive, especially if you're looking at statewide elections. Right. It's like, how are we going to put somebody at all these polls? Certainly the big areas like the cities, I think we could do, we probably could man those a little better. I think a lot of us have kind of moved away from the numbers. We don't want to just be crunching numbers all night. We're trying to talk to the candidates, trying to get meaning out of it. So I think, but at the same time, there are people who want this data right away, and we were a little bit frustrated too with some of the numbers. We had one campaign, the Eric Lesser campaign out in Western Mass, where he had declared victory, and we're looking at the AP numbers, and he's down by 127 votes, and 4 precincts hadn't reported yet, and we're getting emails from people saying, why haven't you declared him the victor? And it's like, well, we can't just take the candidate's word for it. We're sure he's probably right.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we don't have the numbers yet. So
locally, a great example of that would be the Donohue-Perot race. I mean, the Donohue party was well underway, probably past the point of being overdone before Worcester had even called results.
Right.
And that's just the byproduct of having people at each polling place who can pull in numbers right when they're being printed from the machines, aggregate them, and they won.
And most of the time the candidates know before anybody else knows,
Right.
because they've got people sitting at their, they're sometimes doing exit polling, trying to get an idea for how well they're doing at the polls, so they're usually the first to know.
Yeah. I mean, another example is Kevin Cassen, who I think tweeted that Mary Keefe had won, I want to say 5 minutes after the polls closed, which seems way too soon. Maybe 10 minutes after the polls closed?
No, that sounds perfectly logical. If you have somebody at each polling place, that's you right away.
You call them up and say, what's the numbers? You add them and
so
you say,
the way it works is at 8 o'clock the polls shut down. Usually at most 10 minutes, each ward will print a strip from the machine itself and hang it outside the polling place, which is locked down. and you've got your political operatives outside just scribbling down numbers and then calling them into whatever respective boiler rooms they're representing. And if you have somebody at each polling place, you know what your vote totals are for all participants before the clerk does.
Maybe this is what we need. How many people do we have to do this?
It just depends on the size of the race. But again, I think that's what gets interesting when you look at Senate races or constitutional offices. Now you get 351 cities and towns that you need to be pulling in numbers from. It's almost impossible to get a high-level view of what's happening until the clerk's report, unless you have somebody at every potential ward
thousands of
throughout.
people.
Right.
Well, so we talked 15 minutes about this. We actually got 100% of this done. So we're going to do
in 4 years.
We're going to do an introductory job on talking about journalism and talking about the city manager search. Let's talk about journalism for 10 minutes and city manager for 5 maybe. The Telegram and Gazette in recent years has been sold twice. It seems like it's at some sort of stable place. Lots of layoffs. Most recently, a fifth of the newsroom staff was laid off, including Noah Bombard. Some of them have gone on to other things, and some of them still looking for work. I think beyond that sort of human, there was an interim publisher, now there's a final publisher. Beyond the sort of human drama of a bunch of people's lives being completely turned upside down, we have this question of who is going to report about stuff like local politics and like anything at all. Today in the Telegram there was a really vague article about a speech that the TNG publisher made where he said both that they were going to develop a strategic plan, which is exciting. I don't know why you tell people we're going to have a plan, I guess to acknowledge you don't have a plan, and also that they were going to expand local coverage. I don't even believe that.
I think, strategic plan is a phrase that is used a lot. It's one that I think most people are rightfully a little bit skeptical of. I think it's one thing for a publisher to say, look, this is what we're going to do. We're going to put a reporter here, or we're going to move resources this way, or we're going to shift. But to just kind of say that we're going to work on a strategic plan. I think he's new and people are looking for some sort of direction. So that's certainly pointing them in the right direction. But I don't know. Everything I think is still in flux in this city, and we've seen that for several years with reductions in staffing at Worcester Magazine, at the Telegram, at everywhere. But news is still going to get covered one way or the other. It's just a matter of who's doing it and how many people they have on the ground.
Well, I tell you, there's two things that have three things that have sort of caught my eye, I guess, since this all this latest round of TNG chaos. One of them is seeing Go Local Worcester sort of seeming like they really want to jump into the breach there. One is Bill Randall launching a Worcester Herald, a sort of a group blog, an aggregator blog. Both of those projects I'm really jealous of, that they've been able to get so many people involved in their projects. Both of those projects I'm really frustrated about because I feel like their information is really unreliable. There's not anybody who knows anything about anything, looking over what's going on. I'll give you an example. One of the first Worcester Herald articles I read. It was an awesome article because it talked a little bit about local John Birch Society stuff, so that was cool. Getting back to the Telegram Gazette and its Bircher roots. It was cruddy in that it was like talking about Ron Madnick and his time on the city council, which Ron Madnick's never been on the city council. Bill Randall knows this. If somebody's reading this article before they put it on the site, you can make these little corrections and just make the article 10% more accurate. But it's not happening. So it's a mixture of jealousy and also frustration. Mass Live, which is a spin-off of the Springfield Republican newspaper.
Well, we're a separate company. We're owned by Advanced Digital, so we're affiliated with the Springfield Republican. Their stories appear on Mass Live's website, but we actually have our own staff. I have about 9 reporters right now covering Mass. We've got 2 in Worcester right now. I hope to be hiring another one within the next week or so. So we'll have 3 people. One of them, Lindsay Corcoran, lives right here in the city. Fantastic reporter. And then there's me as well. I'm working out of Springfield most of the time. But I think the strides that we're trying to make, at least, is to just try to find what's not being reported. Try to do make a unique take on the news every week, and fill kind of some of the gaps that have been left open by some of the coverage here. And also, not to toot our own horn too much, but you don't have to pay to read our stories, which Having worked at the Telegram for 3 years, I mean that was.
I don't want to break. I don't know how to say this to you, but you don't have to pay to read the Telegram Gazette website
well,
either.
if you know what you're doing, you don't have to. But you've got to try to do something to get around it.
Sure, we won't say what.
Yeah, and I think that was one of the most difficult things at the Telegram was trying to increase coverage in the city, try to increase the number of people reading our stories, while at the same time hitting the kickback from people saying, why am I hitting this paywall? And it drove me crazy because I was kind of sympathetic at the same time, and it's so nice not to hear those comments anymore from people when we send them our stories.
So there's a lot of people writing a lot of stuff about Worcester. Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, these are just full of information about Worcester. And if you just walk around and talk to people every day, you could find out a lot about what's going on in Worcester. But there's this thing that that journalistic project brings of, you talk to a guy at a bar, he tells you something, and then you go out and you make a phone call to confirm it.
Right.
And that's like the value add. And it's also like that curation of of the 20 people I talked to in bars today, here are the 3 people who said something that's the most interesting. I wonder, I mean, how do you sort of think about covering the city of Worcester, I guess? How do you
that
decide?
happens online too. I mean, the whole Worcester bus incident, which Mass Live, I should say, was the first to have that story. I mean, that was somebody tipping me off and saying, hey, look at this video that I just saw posted. And I'm sitting there watching the video and I'm like, holy cow.
That's
and
a story.
I went to Telegram, I went to Boston, I'm like, nobody has this thing yet. I'm like, and I was up till about 3 in the morning making sure we had that story by 6 a.m. on Friday morning. And then, of course, everybody hopped on that story. We got lucky there. I mean, it's all about who you happen to connect with. And, sometimes the Telegram oftentimes will get those kind of tips as well.
Right. I mean, so I mean, is the way that you're, I guess I'm just wondering, when your reporters wake up in the morning, obviously they're checking Twitter and Facebook and whatever to see if there's stuff like that they need to search out.
Right.
But I mean, are you thinking about Worcester? And I guess I'm just wondering, what is the starting point for covering Worcester?
The starting point is actually being on the street. And I know this was one of the issues when we moved over to the big tower on the Telegram. Is some of us there were saying, hey, we should have a storefront office, even just a couple of desks, just to be on the street. There are things that you find out about, you hear about, you learn about that you don't find out on the 3rd or 4th floor of a building, And so our reporters right now, we don't have an office in Worcester. They're working from coffee shops in Worcester. They're working from their car. They're working from the neighborhood.
What coffee shops?
Acoustic Java, New Cafe, I don't know. What else can we plug here?
Bean Counter? They should go work from the Bean Counter too.
I've worked from the Bean Counter before. I try not to work from there too often because I end up eating the carrot cake there and it gets a little bit too much.
Sugar highs can screw you up, sure.
It's funny though, because the only person I saw more on election day than I don't know her name, but the only person I saw more than Walter Bird was one of your people,
probably
young woman who was
Megan or Lindsay.
Saw her all day traversing the city, just talking to people, photographs and whatnot, as well as being in City Hall as numbers were coming in. And I didn't see the same presence from the Telegram. It's not to say that they're not out there, but I think what you're saying, the visibility, actually interacting with human beings, is where your stories come from.
Yeah, and I think we'd like to. I think we. It's no secret we'd love to have an office in Worcester at some point too, but at this point it's not really necessary. It's like, we really want our reporters out in the field and reporting from the neighborhood. So and that you see things that you just, like I say, you just don't see if you're sitting up in an office.
Well, good luck.
You mentioned Reddit and other places as well too, as well as the Worcester Herald and some flaws that you picked up there. I mean, the thing that always strikes me with Reddit is you hear these first-person accounts of things that are happening, or the way things happen, and they're always these bastardized stories, right? I mean, it's like because it's just one person's perspective with no confirmation and oftentimes no institutional knowledge of what they're actually discussing, and you could drive trucks through the holes that are in stories that are told. And this is like people trying to constructively give other people new information about what neighborhoods are safe or what's going on in the city, and it's really bad information. And it's, on the one hand, it's really nice to hear the Telegram saying that they're going to get more local. Well, what have you been doing? You're a local newspaper, right? I mean, that's how can you get more local than being a local newspaper? It's
just Maine South.
No, I mean, I don't know. It's a really weird place. It's a weird thing to see where, you do have some other entities that maybe haven't done the best job of filling those gaps, but it's clear that there are still gaps to be filled. huge gaps. I think you folks are really the only ones that are doing it in a really professional context, trying to move in and fill those holes.
Yeah,
as opposed to other folks who are carving out the territory they already had and digging in their heels.
I think the advantage that we have online is that we don't have a newspaper. You know, Mass Live, I mean, there's the Springfield Republican, but they're their own separate entity. We, you know, and this has been liberating for me, because for years I've worked for newspapers that have websites.
Right.
And we're not a newspaper that have a website. We're a statewide news website. And the company that owns us has a newspaper. And they have several newspapers. They have a lot of newspapers, actually. So that has allowed us to really focus our efforts. We don't have daily news meetings where we talk about what's going to be on page 1 tomorrow. We're talking about what's on the website right now. And, you know, I'm looking at it every day on our Worcester page saying, you know, okay, I'm from the Worcester area. Is this stuff relevant to me? What does it mean to me? Is our whole page full of crime today? Maybe we need to, you know, branch out and find something else that's going on rather than, you know, somebody else who was shot or stabbed. You know, so these are things that I think that we're concentrating on right now that I know it was frustrating before working for print, because, you know, it was all about getting that print newspaper out. And the website was a priority, but sometimes not.
I always remember my favorite conversations that I've had with some of your former colleagues would be when the website was treated like an extension of the newspaper, and then you'd see something come out of left field that I don't think a print person could ever really account for, like a two-headed cat. And when the two-headed cat comes up, that's when you have a team, like a SWAT team, on standby just to pepper advertisements and know that that is going to be plastered everywhere. And that's where your paywall comes down, and you know, I mean, it's nothing but an advertising dump, and it's the amount of time. I think it happened eventually, but it seemed like it took way too long for the Telegram to realize, wait, this two-headed cat is actually going to pay our mortgages for the next 6 months.
Yeah, and you get those big hits. There's an example at the Telegram I remember that really irked me, and that there was we did a story on this photo that went viral of this a little baby. It was a premature baby. I think they were twins, and one was like grabbing the other one's heel. It was this really sweet photo. And the story was how the photo went viral on this radio station's Facebook page.
Okay.
It was a Telegram photo. It's like, why wasn't it going viral on our Facebook page?
Right.
Because we had treated it just like, oh, that's a cute photo. It went in the print edition. It went in our archives. Somebody else saw it and put it out there, and this Facebook page for this radio station was getting, like, you know, thousands and thousands of likes and everything. And we ended up hopping on that and catching a little bit of the wave, but it was really like, you know, we need to be ahead of those things. We need to be grabbing those things and marketing ourselves rather than just waiting for someone else to find it and then reporting on their success.
It must be liberating, though, when you're dealing in web only, when that story does come out of left field that you couldn't have accounted for. It's just a matter of shifting focus to, you know, above the proverbial fold, as opposed to screaming stop the presses and realize that
we got to switch over to the city manager. We only got like 2 minutes left.
Oh, that's boring.
Well, it is boring. And Tuesday we're going to find
need more than 2 minutes for a city manager?
So Tuesday we're going to find out who our new city manager is. Right, the city council will announce this is who we decided of the candidates. We had a search firm come in. They got a bunch of candidates. They narrowed it down to 3. Some people were complaining there were discarded candidates who were awesome. A lot of people were complaining that these 3 candidates are not that inspiring. I could talk for a half an hour show, for example, about how city solicitor David Moore is a mildly cruddy city solicitor and is not a great choice for city manager. It doesn't matter. There's been some people filing information requests trying to find out details of the search, trying to find out details of the selection process. So far they've been rebuffed. There's been some accusations of maybe open meeting law violations. Anytime the city of Worcester does anything, they're violating open meeting law. It's just the way they roll. That will play out over the next few months, I'm sure. Tuesday we'll find out who it's going to be. Will it be City Solicitor David Moore? Will it be Peter Grazikowski, formerly City Manager of East Providence? Will it be Oscar Rodriguez, formerly City Manager of Taos, New Mexico? It will be one of those 3. I thought maybe we could talk for 10 minutes about, is there a way to frame this conversation that, like, it seems that the obvious takeaway here is that this is some sort of conspiracy to force us into having a strong mayor form of government. Is there a way to not have a conspiracy view of it? I don't think we have time to have that conversation today on the show.
We'll just go with conspiracy.
We'll debunk it. We'll create and debunk the conspiracy next episode. Brendan Melican is on the show today. Thank you, sir.
Thanks for having me.
Noah Bombard of Mass Live.
Always a pleasure.
Congratulations on your new job, and eager to see what goes on. Worcester's beautiful Winslow Street Park. Everybody should come out here and hang out sometimes. It's a nice park. Ed Hyder's is right next door, people. You can have a picnic lunch.
Always a party.
I'm Michael Benedetti. We'll be talking to you next week or the week after. Bye-bye, Worcester.